The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, crackling through quantum communication arrays across every major Earth station simultaneously. Admiral Sarachin stood in the war room deep beneath Geneva, watching the holographic display flicker to life. The alien face that materialized was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Crystalline features that shifted like living glass, eyes that burned with the cold light of distant stars. Primitive species of the third planet. The being spoke, its voice a harmony of crystalline chimes that somehow conveyed absolute contempt. I am High Arbiter Zektharian of the Galactic Council. Your recent expansion beyond your solar system has been noted and evaluated. Chun felt her blood turn to ice. Around a table, the Joint Chiefs exchanged grim looks. They had all known this day would come. Ever since the first human colony ships had reached Proxima Centauri 5 years ago, the possibility of contact had loomed over every military planning session. The alien continued, its image rotating slowly as if addressing the entire planet. For the past 10,000 of your years, the Council has maintained order across this galaxy. 147 species have joined our alliance. Each understood their place. Each accepted the natural hierarchy of civilization. President Martinez leaned forward, her knuckles white against the conference table. Natural hierarchy, she whispered. They're talking about slavery. Your species shows certain troubling characteristics. Zektharian's voice grew colder. If such a thing were possible. Independence, aggression, an unfortunate tendency toward chaos. These traits have been observed in 12 previous species. Each required correction. The hologram paused, and in that silence, Chin could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. She had dedicated her life to protecting Earth. But how do you fight an entire galaxy? The Council offers humanity one opportunity for peaceful integration. You will immediately cease all expansion beyond your solar system. You will surrender your military vessels and weapons of mass destruction. Your governments will dissolve, and Council administrators will oversee your transition to productive membership in galactic society. Your people will be relocated to designated worlds where they can contribute meaningfully to Council objectives. Chen's tablet chimed softly. Intelligence reports were flooding in from deep space monitoring stations. Ships, hundreds of them, appearing at the edge of the solar system like dark stars bleeding into reality. Each one was massive, their hulls gleaming with technologies that made Earth's most advanced warships look like paper airplanes. You have 72 of your hours to broadcast your acceptance across all communication channels, the alien announced. Failure to comply will result in the sterilization of your planet and the relocation of surviving populations to labor worlds. This is not a negotiation. This is the mercy of the Council. The transmission ended, leaving the war room in suffocating silence. Chin stared at the empty space where the hologram had been, her mind racing through scenarios, each one ending in human extinction or eternal slavery. Admiral? President Martinez's voice was steady, but Chin could see the terror in her eyes. Options. Chin stood, her uniform crisp despite the weight of the moment. The intelligence is still coming in, but preliminary scans show approximately 400 vessels. Each one outmasses our largest dreadnought by a factor 10. Their technology appears to be centuries, possibly millennia ahead of ours. So we surrender, General Harrison said quietly. Say what we can. No, the word came from Martinez with surprising force. Absolutely not. I've read the historical files on conquered species. Productive membership means slave labor. Relocation means breaking up families, destroying cultures. They're not offering us life. They're offering us a slow death. Chun pulled up the tactical display, showing Earth's defensive capabilities. Orbital platforms, lunar bases, the asteroid mining facilities that could be converted to weapon production. It looked pathetically small against the alien armada. Madam President, she said carefully, we have to be realistic. Even if we can inflict casualties, the cost would be... The cost of freedom always is, Martinez interrupted. My grandmother fought in the resistance during World War III. She used to tell me that some things are worth dying for, that some fights are worth taking even when you know you'll lose. Chen felt something ignite in her chest. Not hope, but something fiercer. something that had driven humanity from caves to stars. "What are your orders, Madam President?" Martinez stood, her small frame somehow filling the room with presence. "Send a message to every human colony, every orbital station, every ship in space. Tell them what we're facing. Then get me a connection to the Galactic Council." "Ma'am, they want an answer in 72 hours. Martinez smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "They'll have one." The war room erupted into activity as officers rushed to execute orders. Chen remained at the tactical display, studying the alien fleet positions. 400 ships against humanity's few dozen combat vessels. It was mathematical suicide. But as she watched Earth's defensive networks come online, as emergency broadcasts began reaching the colonies, as ordinary people across the solar system began volunteering for what everyone knew was a hopeless fight, Chen felt something she hadn't expected. Pride. They were about to show the galaxy what humanity was made of. The response came exactly 71 hours and 59 minutes after the Council's ultimatum. President Martinez stood alone in the communications center, her image broadcast simultaneously to every corner of human space, and, more importantly, to the waiting alien fleet. High Arbiter Zektharian materialized in the quantum field, his crystalline features reflecting what might have been amusement. Behind him, Chun could see the bridge of his flagship, a cathedral of alien technology that hummed with barely contained power. "Primitive leader," Zektharian's voice carried the weight of eons. "We trust you have made the rational choice. The Council's patience is not infinite." Martinez clasped her hands behind her back, her posture military straight. "High Arbiter, I have consulted with the people of Earth and our colonies. We have reached a unanimous decision regarding your generous offer." "Excellent. Begin transmitting the coordinates of your military installations. Our administrators will arrive within—" No. The single word hung in the quantum field like a detonation. Zektharian's form flickered, his crystalline features shifting through what Chen recognized as shock. "Clarify your statement, Primitive." Martinez smiled. "I said no. We decline your offer of slavery. We reject your claim of authority over humanity. We deny your right to threaten us, conquer us, or relocate us. In short, High Arbiter, go to hell." The alien's form solidified, burning brighter with what could only be rage. "You dare refuse the Council? Your species barely understands faster than light travel. You possess no advanced weaponry. Your largest vessels are insignificant compared to our scouts. What possible logic drives the suicidal decision?" "Logic." Martinez laughed, and the sound carried across every human communication channel in the solar system. "You want to know about human logic? Here it is. We would rather die free than live as slaves. We would rather fight and lose and surrender without trying. That's not logic, High Arbiter. That's humanity." Chun watched the tactical displays as human forces moved into position. It was pitiful. 43 combat vessels, ranging from retrofitted mining ships to the newest dreadnoughts, against 400 alien warships that could have been built by gods. "Your defiance is noted," Zektharian said, his voice now carrying harmonics that made the quantum receivers scream with feedback. "And irrelevant. We have destroyed species far more advanced than yours. The Keth Mari had energy shields that could withstand stellar radiation. The Vorthak possessed weapons that could crack moons. All knelt before the Council's might." "Then they weren't fighting for the right things," Martinez replied calmly. "Admiral Chun, please show our guests what we've been working on." Chen activated the deep space sensors, focusing on the asteroid belt. What the alien saw made Zektharian's form pulse with what might have been surprise. Humanity had been busy during those 72 hours. Every mining station, every industrial platform, every piece of human infrastructure in the belt had been converted into weapons. Asteroids themselves had been hollowed out and filled with antimatter charges. Automated systems, normally used for processing, now guided massive kinetic projectiles toward predetermined intercept points. Impressive, Zektharian admitted, but ultimately futile. Your primitive weapons cannot penetrate our shielding. Maybe not, Chen said, stepping into the transmission range. But we learned something interesting from your ship's energy signatures. Your shields are designed to deflect directed energy weapons and absorb kinetic impacts. Very impressive technology. She paused, enjoying the moment. Unfortunately for you, they're not designed to handle what we call nuclear pulse propulsion at point-blank range. The asteroid belt erupted, hundreds of hollowed-out rocks, each the size of a city block, suddenly accelerated to significant fractions of light speed. But these weren't aimed at the alien ships. They were aimed at empty space around them. As the Council fleet moved to intercept what they assumed were kinetic weapons, the asteroids detonated, not with explosive force, but with carefully calculated nuclear pulses that created electromagnetic disruption fields. The alien ships found themselves flying through pockets of space where their own shields became weapons against them, their energy matrices destabilizing and cascading failures. 3 Council vessels simply vanished, their hulls torn apart by their own defensive systems. A dozen more suffered critical damage, their crystalline hulls cracking like ice under sudden temperature change. Impossible, Zectharian breathed. Martinez leaned forward. High Arbiter, let me explain something about humanity. We're not the strongest species or the smartest or the most advanced, but we are the most stubborn. We're the species that looked at fire and decided to tame it. We looked at flight and built wings. We looked at space and built rockets. And now we're looking at your fleet, and we're deciding to teach you why threatening Earth was the biggest mistake in your species' history. The alien's form was flickering now, his harmonious voice cracking with static. You have destroyed less than 1% of our fleet. This changes nothing, doesn't it? Chen asked, highlighting the tactical display. Because I'm reading massive energy buildups across human space. Every orbital platform, every colony, every single human installation is powering up weapon systems. Did you really think we'd fight you with just our military? Across the solar system, civilian vessels were joining the defense grid. Cargo haulers mounted with improvised rail guns, passenger liners carrying volunteer crews, and whatever weapons they could carry. Even the luxury yachts of Earth's elite had been converted into missile platforms. It was still hopeless, but it was also magnificent. You cannot win, Zectharian said, but his voice carried less certainty now. Martinez nodded. You're probably right. But High Arbiter, you're about to learn why humans have a saying. It's not the size of the dog in the fight. It's the size of the fight in the dog. The first phase of humanity's war for survival had begun. The battle raged for 18 hours, and space itself seemed to burn. Admiral Chen stood in the tactical center aboard the U.S. Defiance, humanity's flagship, watching her species fight with a ferocity that defied every tactical manual ever written. The bridge shuddered as another Council energy beam raked their hull, but the ship held together through sheer engineering stubbornness and the desperate prayers of her crew. Ma'am! Lieutenant Torres called from the sensor station. The lunar defense grid is reporting massive casualties. They've lost 60% of their platforms. Chen gritted her teeth. The moon had become humanity's fortress, bristling with every weapon Earth could manufacture. But the Council ships were methodically dismantling the defenses with surgical precision, their energy weapons cutting through human shields like light through glass. What about the Mars colonies? Still holding, but barely. The Olympus station is requesting immediate reinforcement. Chen pulled up the tactical overview, and her heart sank. Of humanity's original 43 combat vessels, only 19 remain operational. The Council had lost perhaps 30 ships, a devastating blow by their standards, but mathematically insignificant against their overwhelming numbers. But the humans weren't fighting like a military force anymore. They were fighting like a cornered species. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a quantum physicist who had volunteered for combat duty, was monitoring the enemy ship emissions from her position aboard a retrofitted mining vessel. She had noticed something the military analysts had missed, a pattern in the Council ship's energy signatures that repeated every 14.7 minutes. Admiral Chun. Vasquez's voice crackled through the communication system. I need you to redirect all sensor rays to coordinates 127 Mark 85. There's something you need to see. Chun complied, and what appeared on her screens made her breath catch. The Council flagship, Zectharian's massive command vessel, was pulsing with energy in a complex rhythm. and that rhythm was being echoed by every other ship in the alien fleet. It's a network, Vasquez explained rapidly. They're not individual ships. They're nodes in a collective consciousness. That's why their coordination is so perfect. But, Admiral, if it's a network, it can be hacked, Chin finished, understanding immediately. The plan that formed in the next 30 seconds was pure insanity. It required volunteers to pilot a small ship, basically a modified shuttle, directly into the heart of the Council fleet. The ship would carry humanity's most advanced quantum computer, programmed with a virus designed to exploit the aliens' network communication system. It was a suicide mission with almost no chance of success. Every member of her crew volunteered. Chun chose herself. "Ma'am, I have to protest," Commander Williams said as Chun strapped herself into the shuttle's pilot seat. "You're needed here. Let me take the mission." "Negative, Commander. If this works, you'll need to coordinate the follow-up attacks. If it doesn't..." Chun sealed her helmet and initiated the launch sequence. "Tell President Martinez that humanity went down fighting." The shuttle launched from the Defiance's bay, its small form invisible against a backdrop of burning spacecraft and stellar debris. Chin flew through the chaos of battle, weaving between energy beams and plasma bursts, her destination the massive alien flagship that dominated the center of the Council formation. The quantum computer hummed behind her, its processing cores running calculations that push human technology to its absolute limits. The virus it contained was elegant in its simplicity, a feedback loop that would turn the aliens' greatest strength into their fatal weakness. "Unknown human vessel." Zektharian's voice filled her cockpit as defensive systems locked onto her ship. "Your sacrifice is meaningless. Turn back and die with dignity." "High Arbiter," Chin replied, pushing her engines to maximum burn. "Let me show you something we humans call a Hail Mary pass." The shuttle's hull began to glow from atmospheric friction as she entered the flagship's defensive perimeter. Energy beams converged on her position. But the small ship's erratic flight pattern and revolutionary human pilot instincts kept her alive just long enough. She crashed into the alien ship's communication array at nearly 10% of light speed. The quantum computer survived the impact for exactly 4.7 seconds, long enough to upload its payload into the Council's network consciousness. What happened next changed the course of galactic history. The virus spread through the alien network like wildfire through dry grass. Each ship that received the infected signal immediately transmitted it to every other vessel in the fleet. Within minutes, the entire Council armada was experiencing cascading system failures as their own communication protocols turned against them. Ships began firing on their allies. Navigation systems sent vessels careening into asteroids. The flagship itself, Zektharian's pride, began to list dangerously as its artificial gravity generators fought against each other. But the virus did something else, something Dr. Vasquez hadn't anticipated. It transmitted data. For the first time in galactic history, the Council's complete database, 10,000 years of conquest, slavery, and systematic oppression, was broadcast across every inhabited system in the galaxy. Species that had been told they were alone discovered they were part of a vast empire built on fear. Slave worlds learned they were not the only ones suffering. The revolution began immediately. On 17 different worlds, enslaved populations rose against their council overseers. Mining operations that had run for centuries suddenly stopped producing. The carefully maintained order that kept the galaxy docile for millennia collapsed in a matter of hours. High Arbiter Zektharian, his flagship crippled and his fleet in chaos, sent one final transmission to the human forces. "What have you done?" President Martinez, watching from Earth as the Council fleet began its retreat, smiled grimly. "High Arbiter, we just showed the galaxy what freedom looks like." The Council's threat had backfired spectacularly. Instead of conquering humanity, they had awakened a sleeping giant that stretched across the stars. And that giant was very, very angry. 6 months after the Battle of Sol, the galaxy was burning. General Harrison stood on the observation deck of Olympus Station, watching the latest report stream in from across human space. What had begun as humanity's desperate last stand had evolved into something unprecedented, a galactic uprising that was tearing the Council's empire apart at its foundations. "Ma'am, Captain Rodriguez approached with the latest intelligence summaries. We're receiving confirmation from the Kepler sector. The Vorthack resistance has successfully liberated 3 more industrial worlds. They're requesting human tactical advisors. Harrison nodded, still amazed by the transformation. The Vorthack, the same species Ectherian had mentioned as having weapons capable of cracking moons, had been enslaved for over 2,000 years. Their rebellion had been swift and absolutely merciless. What about the Centauri front? Admiral Chen's task force has linked up with the Kethmari fleet. They're preparing for a joint assault on the Council stronghold at Rigel. Chen had survived her suicide mission, though barely. The shuttle crash had left her in a medical coma for 2 months. When she woke up, she found herself promoted to fleet admiral and placed in command of humanity's rapidly expanding war machine. The transformation of human military doctrine had been remarkable. Pre-war, Earth strategy had focused on defense and deterrence. Now, human forces were operating as liberation specialists, teaching enslaved species the arts of guerrilla warfare, technological sabotage, and what humans had dubbed asymmetric freedom fighting. General, Rodriguez continued, there's something else. We're getting reports of spontaneous uprisings on worlds we haven't even contacted yet. The virus Dr. Vasquez created didn't just hack their communications. It seems to have awakened something in the enslaved populations. Harrison wasn't surprised. Humanity had learned something profound about the Council's empire. It was built entirely on fear and illusion of invincibility. Once that illusion shattered, the entire structure began collapsing under its own weight. The door chimed, and President Martinez entered, flanked by her security detail. She looked older than her years now. The weight of leading humanity's first interstellar, war etched in the lines around her eyes. General, what's our status? Madam President, we currently have active military operations in 47 star systems. The Alliance of Free Worlds now includes 23 species, with more joining every week. Our combined fleet strength has grown over 2,000 vessels. Martinez smiled, the first genuine smile Harrison had seen from her in months. 2,000 ships. 6 months ago, we had 43. It's not just the numbers, ma'am. It's the coordination. Species that have been enemies for centuries are working together. The Andromedans are sharing their shield technology with the Vorthack. The Kethmari are teaching everyone their energy weapon designs. It's like watching the birth of a new civilization. The holographic display activated, showing a real-time map of the galaxy. Green indicators marked liberated worlds. Blue showed active resistance movements, and red revealed the shrinking territory still under Council control. How many worlds are still under their direct control? Martinez asked. Approximately 40%, but that number drops daily. The Council's response has been predictable. Harrison highlighted several red zones that pulse with ominous light. They're implementing what they call final protocols on worlds they can't hold. Orbital bombardment, atmospheric poisoning, complete sterilization. Martinez's expression hardened. How many? 17 worlds so far. Estimated casualties in the billions. The room fell silent. This was the cost of their rebellion. Not just human lives, but the lives of countless species who had dared to hope for freedom. Ma'am, Rodriguez spoke quietly. There's more. Our deep space monitoring stations are detecting massive energy buildups in the galactic core. The Council appears to be activating something they call the Omega Protocol. Harrison pulled up the intelligence reports. According to captured data, it's a weapon built into the galaxy's central black hole. Theoretical yield suggests it could sterilize every inhabited world simultaneously. Martinez sat down heavily. They destroy the entire galaxy rather than lose control of it. It appears so, ma'am. Estimated time to activation is 6 weeks. The weight of that statement settled over the room like a shroud. 6 weeks to either win the war completely or watch everything die. Options? Martinez asked. Harrison activated the tactical display, showing the galactic core region. The weapon is protected by the largest concentration of Council forces we've ever detected. Over 1,000 ships, all of their most advanced designs. The facility itself is built into a construct surrounding the black hole, essentially a ring world with the mass of a solar system. Impossible to assault directly, Rodriguez observed. Under normal circumstances, yes. But we're not fighting a normal war anymore. Harrison highlighted movement patterns across the galaxy. Every liberated species is contributing to a final offensive. The Vorthak are bringing their mooncracker weapons. The Kethmari have developed new shield penetration technology. The Andromedans are providing their fleet of invisible ships. Martinez stood, her decision made. How long to coordinate the assault? 5 weeks if we push everything. But ma'am, even with our combined forces, the casualties will be enormous. We're talking about potentially 90% losses. And if we don't try, 100%. Martinez walked to the observation port, looking out at the stars that had once seemed so distant and peaceful. Now each one represented world in rebellion, species fighting for the right to exist free. General, send order to all Alliance commanders. Begin preparations for Operation Galactic Dawn. Tell them, she paused, searching for the right words. Tell them that freedom has never been free, but it's always been worth the price. As Harrison began transmitting orders that would mobilize the largest military force in galactic history, Martinez remained at the window. In 6 weeks, they would either be free or extinct. There was no middle ground left. The final battle began with silence. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the U.S. Liberation, the massive flagship leading humanity's contribution to the largest military force ever assembled. Around her, the combined fleets of 23 species hung in space like a constellation of vengeance. Over 3,000 vessels representing every free world in the galaxy. All ships report ready, Admiral. Commander Williams announced. The Vorthak dreadnoughts are in position. Kethmari stealth squadrons have achieved insertion coordinates. Andromedan support fleet is standing by. Chen nodded, her eyes fixed on the tactical display, showing their target. The Omega station dominated the galactic core like a metallic parasite wrapped around the supermassive black hole. The Council's ultimate weapon pulsed with energy that made stars look dim, its surface bristling with defensive installations that had never been tested in combat. They were about to change that. Admiral, the communications officer called, "We're receiving transmission from President Martinez." The president's image appeared on the main screen, transmitted simultaneously to every ship in the Allied fleet. Behind her, Earth hung like a blue jewel against the stars, the world that had started this revolution. Commanders of the Alliance of Free Worlds, Martinez began, her voice carrying across space to reach warriors of dozens of species. 6 months ago, the Council made us an offer. Submit or die. Today, we give them our final answer. Chen watched the faces of her bridge crew, humans who had volunteered to fly into almost certain death for the chance to strike one last blow for freedom. Their expressions were calm, determined. They had made their peace with what was coming. Some of you are fighting for worlds that were enslaved before your species learned to speak. Others are fighting for children who deserve to grow up free. All of you are fighting for the right to choose your own destiny. Today, we end 10,000 years of tyranny. The tactical display chimed. The Omega station's energy readings were spiking. In 17 minutes, the weapon would be fully charged and ready to fire. This is Admiral Chen to all ships, she announced. Operation Galactic Dawn is now active. All units, attack Pattern Omega. Show them what freedom looks like. The Allied fleet surged forward like a wave of light breaking against the darkness. The Council's defensive perimeter erupted in response, energy beams and plasma bursts turning space into a maze of deadly light. Ships died in the first minutes. Dozens of them. Their crews vaporized before they could even return fire. But the Alliance kept coming. The Vorthak heavy assault ships led the charge, their hulls designed to absorb tremendous punishment. Behind them, human vessels wove through the defensive fire with the erratic unpredictability that had become their signature. Kethmari stealth fighters appeared from nowhere to strike at critical systems before vanishing again. Admiral, Lieutenant Torres called from the sensor station. The station's energy output is reaching critical levels. 8 minutes to weapon discharge. Chen watched the battle unfold with professional calm. They were losing ships faster than anticipated, but the plan was working. Each wave of attackers was forcing the Council to divert power from the Omega weapon to defensive systems. "Signal the Andromedan fleet," she ordered. "Execute Phase 2. What happened next had never been attempted in galactic history. The Andromedans, masters of dimensional technology, opened what they called a folded space corridor, essentially a tunnel through space-time that bypassed the station's outer defenses entirely. The tunnel opened directly inside the Omega Station's superstructure. Vorthack boarding parties, equipped with their species' most devastating weapons, poured through the breach. These were warriors whose ancestors had cracked moons, now fighting the corridors of the galaxy's most important military installation. "Admiral," Williams reported, "we're receiving signals from inside the station. The boarding teams have located the weapon control center. On the main screen, grainy footage from a Vorthack helmet camera showed the interior of the control room. The technology was beyond human comprehension. Crystalline structures that pulse with power, geometric forms that seemed to bend space around them. And there, at the center of it all, High Arbiter Zektharian. The alien leader stood before a control matrix that could have been carved from frozen starlight. His crystalline form was cracked now, his perfect features marred by what looked like stress fractures. "Human Admiral," his voice carried across the communication link. "You have achieved the impossible, but you are too late. The weapon charges cannot be stopped." Chin smiled grimly. "High Arbiter, you still don't understand humans, do you?" On her signal, the Vorthack boarding party activated devices they had carried through the dimensional tunnel. Not weapons, something far more dangerous. Antimatter charges, precisely calibrated to create a controlled implosion. "You're not trying to stop the weapon," Chin explained as the charges activated. "You're trying to redirect it." The implosion created a gravitational anomaly that lasted exactly 3.2 seconds. In that brief moment, the Omega weapon's targeting system recalibrated, shifting from its programmed targets to the nearest source of Council energy signatures. The weapon fired. Instead of sterilizing the galaxy's inhabited worlds, the Omega weapon's full power discharged directly into the Council's own fleet. 1,000 ships, each one representing centuries of technological advancement, simply ceased to exist. The energy release was so massive that it temporarily outshone the galactic core's black hole. High Arbiter Zektharian's final transmission was barely audible through the static. "Impossible, we are the Council, we are eternal." The Omega Station collapsed into the black hole, taking with it the last symbol of the Council's power. President Martinez's voice reached every ship in the Allied fleet. "All vessels, this is Earth Command. The Council's military command structure has been eliminated. Repeat, the war is over. We are free." Chin stood on her bridge, watching the celebration begin across 3,000 ships. Species that had been enslaved for millennia were dancing in their corridors. Worlds that had known only oppression were broadcasting songs of freedom. But she also saw the cost. Nearly half their fleet was gone. Billions had died in the uprising. The galaxy would take generations to heal from 10,000 years of tyranny. "Admiral," Commander Williams asked quietly, "what happens now?" Chin looked out at the stars, not the distant, threatening lights they had seen 6 months ago, but neighbors, friends, partners in building something better. "Now," she said, "now we prove that we're not just good at fighting. We prove we're good at living free." The first Galactic Alliance Congress would convene in 3 months with representatives from every liberated world. There would be challenges, disagreements, conflicts to resolve, but they would face them as equals, not as masters and slaves. Humanity had come to the stars expecting wonder and discovery. Instead, they had found war and oppression. But in fighting against that darkness, they had created something new, a galaxy where every species could choose its own path among the stars. The Council's threat had indeed been answered, and the galaxy would never be the same. The end.